Hey guys, it's Cameron Review for this week's episode of American Horror Story Apocalypse, Episode 8, Sojurn. And going into this episode, I was very unsure with how it was going to turn out, especially because, like I said, last week's episode, while it did give us some stuff that was kind of interesting, a lot of it ended up being just kind of pointless, and I really couldn't tell where this season was going to go. And my hope was that because Michael wasn't in last week's episode, and this one was all Michael, that this would give that season that purpose. It would reignite its purpose. It would remind me, what the point of this season really is, and maybe it would do something to further the story. Instead, what we got here was essentially an episode that could have easily just been like a subplot in one of the episodes. And while last week's episode I thought was okay, this week's was straight up bad. I don't know what this episode was. I mean, there's so much I hated about this episode, but I just want to get into it right now. Now, here's the thing. As much as I did hate this episode, there's really not a ton to talk about because this is easily, I think, the most pointless episode of the entire season. Starting off with that, whole scene with him and Cordelia. Now, this could be a really good scene. We realize that Cordelia has the upper hand. She's gone as far as to make some sort of spell so he can't bring any of the warlocks back. It's a good idea. It shows that Cordelia is very much on top of things, and she's not going to let Michael foil her plans in any way, and they do a good job with that. The problem is that it leaves Michael at a very strange place throughout this whole episode. Michael really doesn't have a lot to do because of the fact that he doesn't have anyone on his side. So he's just kind of moping around the whole episode, just pining for Mead to come back and pining for some sort of purpose in life. And it just isn't very interesting at all. And again, I've said this before and I'll say it again, Cody Fern just is not doing it as this character for me, and especially this episode. I thought he was terrible here. So over the top, so hokey, and I just couldn't take any of it seriously. And I know a lot of this episode was like a comedy, but it doesn't work when you're supposed to have Michael, who's supposed to be like the most, I think, sinister villain we've ever had on this show, and it just doesn't really work in that sense. And that's really a big problem with this entire episode. But going back to that scene, there are some good ideas in there where Cordelia wants to maybe help him out, maybe wants to, she sees the good in him and she wants to try to see if she can set him on a good path, but he's no longer interested in that, and he doesn't want anything to do with her, and now all he cares about is Mead coming back, and I don't really understand why. I mean, the show has shown before that this is not really something that Michael necessarily wants. It's just the path that he's gone on, and if that's what the show is trying to say, this week's episode tells us differently. This week's episode makes it seem like this is absolutely what Michael wants, and there really is no other direction for him whatsoever, and I just don't really buy that. Again, considering what we've seen with Michael in some other episodes, sure, you can tell that he has very much asserted himself as the Antichrist, but from episode 6, we saw this is not exactly what he wanted. It was something that was thrusted upon him from his real father, which is Satan, and, he got all the evil that was inside Tate has been transferred to him, and he doesn't really know what to do with it. But this episode, like I said, it tells us something completely differently, and I do think there was a big problem here because, again, we just have a Michael that does not really have much of a direction this episode. Because what we do get in most of this episode is this ridiculous scenes of him at this Satan cult and him trying to, I guess, find his purpose there. I mean, I really did not understand the point of him going to this Satan cult. He's the Antichrist. Why does he even feel like he needs to be here? I mean, I guess he was trying to, research more about his powers, but it just didn't really make a lot of sense to me what he was really trying to accomplish here. I mean, he's seen human sacrifice before. He's done things that are way beyond, what this cult is doing, and at first, what I thought he was doing is he was trying to recruit, followers. He was trying to get followers to maybe be on his side, maybe set him on some sort of path forward, but that's not what he ends up doing here, because he ends up fleeing that cult very quickly after this. The only person he stays allied with is Madeline. Madeline is the person that he has the most interactions with, who, let me just say, was fucking terrible. I could not stand this actress, just her delivery of, you're the Antichrist, and this is what you're supposed to do. Just all the acting was like that this episode, and I just really couldn't stand it. Like, I'm fine when American Horror Story gets a little corny, and it gets really campy, but this was a level of camp that was nearly unwatchable, and it just did not work here, and especially when it comes to the scenes in that cult. Just the way that Sandra Bernhard was acting, it was just absolutely ridiculous, and I really was not a fan of it, especially, like I said, because it's supposed to be, like, the most evil, we've seen in this show, and they're not taking it nearly as seriously as they should, and I don't understand that. This is the episode that you should absolutely take seriously, and the fact that they're just making jokes, it just really did not work. The dark humor was not there. Nothing they were saying was funny, and I just did not understand why they decided to go in that direction with it. But going back to the whole thing between him and Madeline, the other thing that didn't make sense to me is this whole thing how everyone in this episode is doing the same thing. They're brushing Michael off, and then they suddenly see that he has, like, this mark on the back of his, like, neck or whatever, and oh, he's suddenly the Antichrist. It just, the bait and switch did not really work there. It just felt a little too extreme, and the fact that 1 second, we see Madeline just brushing him off and wanting nothing to do with him, going as far as to possibly kill him, and then suddenly she realizes he's the Antichrist, and she's, like, freaking out. It just did not feel like a natural reaction at all. I understand this cult is very desperate, and they're really pining for their leader, but just the fact that all it took was this one little symbol, I mean, for all they know, someone could have gotten a tattoo. Someone could have gotten a tattoo and tried to falsify themselves as this leader, and they didn't really get into that too much. And again, it's because we're trying to do all this stuff in one episode, and a lot of it just ends up being really pointless because, again, the whole episode is Michael's desire to bring Mead back. So what's even the point of showing this cult? What's even the point of his relationship with Madeline, despite the fact that she's the one that sends him to the people that bring Mead back? Again, it just shows how pointless this entire whole thing was. I didn't care about any of the scenes that were going on here, and again, the fact that he doesn't know how to be an Antichrist, it really confused me, like, what Michael was really trying to go through in this episode. He just seemed like an angsty teenager to me, and it just isn't really an interesting character to follow. I will say there were some things I did like about this episode, as much as I have been trashing on it. I did like the stuff with Venable. I like that we got to see who Venable was before the apocalypse. We saw that she was just as assertive. We saw that she was just as powerful, and we can understand why she would go on to make Outpost 3, and I do think they did a good job with connecting the dots there. The part where it gets a little messy for me is everything with Jeff and Mutt, who, let me just say, I really could not stand them in this episode. I mean, I love Evan Peters as much as the next guy, but he was not good in this episode. I thought he was really phoning it in. They were really trying to play up the whole, like, Dumb and Dumber angle, and I was not having it. What I will say is I do think that, considering what we know ends up happening after, with the apocalypse and everything, I honestly would not be surprised if Jet and Mutt are also subjected to having their memories wiped and having it maybe altered, and maybe that's how Peters turns into Gallant, maybe that's how Eichner turns into, turns into Coco's husband, whose name I'm blanking on right now. So I don't know if that's where they're going with it, but other than, considering where we were at the beginning of the season, I don't really see how else you can get there. And knowing that Mallory and Coco's memories are wiped, I would not be surprised if their memories are wiped as well. And again, that being said, their characters' introductions were just completely pointless. All they're here to do is to build a robot for Michael. That's it. They're there to build a robot, and we see Mead. She awakens at the end of the episode, and that's it. That's literally it. Wow. What a great episode, guys. So much happened, so much important stuff happened here. We had this ridiculous satanic cult that was completely pointless because they were of no use to Michael in the end. We had we had these scenes with him and this, that woman Madeline, who again was completely pointless to him. We had scenes of Michael moping around. Also, what were those hallucinatory scenes of that girl asking for like Fanta or whatever? We had scenes of Evan Peters and Billie Eichner being these like stoners with mop heads and getting blowjobs from women and objectifying all of them. Like, what was even the point of this episode? This is the definition of a time waster. I don't know why we needed this episode. This entire thing could have easily been told to us in like 5 minutes. I always say show not tell, but this is one of the few instances where I really did not need to see this. I did not need to see the whole Michael's path because it wasn't an interesting one. Maybe if they would have shown how Michael was a little bit more conflicted with the path he's going on, maybe that would have worked. But considering the way he was written here, it did not seem like he was conflicted, more just didn't know how to go about it. And that's just not a very interesting story. And again, the fact that they weren't taking it seriously at all really didn't work for me. I know this season has tried to sprinkle in a lot of comedy, and I'm fine with that. You do want some levity in a very dark season like this. But this did not work at all. The tone really felt very uneven, and considering we're following like a satanic cult, I just didn't find it funny, and I didn't think anything, especially everything going on with Jeff and Mutt, I didn't find a single thing they said funny. I just found them really annoying and obnoxious, and it really did not work for me. I will say, like I said, I liked what we got with Venable. I think they are doing a good job of connecting the dots, but again, guys, we have 2 episodes left. 2 episodes left this season, and a lot needs to go down. If the apocalypse doesn't happen at the end of next week's episode, I will say this right now, the theory of this season being split into 2 parts, I honestly do think might possibly be true, because where else can, there's so much other stuff we need to get to. We are still in flashback mode, guys. We are not to the point we were after episode 4. We still haven't seen what follows up there, where Cordelia and, Myrtle and Madison, they end up finding and bringing back Coco and Mallory and Dinah. We still don't know what ends up going down there, and the fact that we're still stuck here, it's just really annoying at this point. I don't know why this needs to go on as long as it is, but unfortunately, this is where we're stuck with this season. And again, if what I'm hearing is true, I would not be surprised this season is split into 2 parts, because there's just simply too much to do, in the next 2 episodes, and I don't know if they can really pull it off, to be honest. I'm really hoping that the next 2 episodes are really great, and maybe they give us some really good conflict, and they give us a really good, idea of what's going to happen for the rest of the season, but considering what we got here, I am not really confident. This season is really starting to lose me, guys, and it sucks, because 2 episodes ago, we got a really great episode, and I thought I finally knew where the season was heading, but now that we're here, I'm really lost as to what the point of this season really is. I mean, these flashbacks, they seem to be trying to show us, like, how Michael got here, but this entire episode wasn't about that. This entire episode is, what does Michael do when he doesn't have a path, and it just wasn't very interesting at all. It doesn't help that Cody Fern can't really act at all in this role. It also doesn't help that most of the characters we met here were completely pointless. The comedy just did not work here. And the absence of many characters, I really did feel it here. I thought that because Michael was here that there would be a greater purpose, but instead it was completely the opposite. And this is probably one of the weakest American Horror Story episodes I could honestly ever seen. I really hated this episode a lot. The only stuff I liked, like I said, was with Venable and some of the connecting of the dots here and there. But other than that, I really was not a fan of this episode at all, and I am going to give episode 8 of American Horror Story Apocalypse Sojourn a D+. Seriously, guys, I don't know where this season is going. I mean, you guys can give me theories and things like that, but it's really starting to lose me, and I'm hoping that it gets better, but I'm just not especially confident. But either way, guys, this is my review of American Horror Story Apocalypse. Sorry this review is so late, but honestly, this was the most uneventful episode of the entire season, so there wasn't really too much to say, but that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.